Today we're talking about weight cutting and why it's so, well, how do I put this? Stupid. I'm a big MMA and boxing fan. I used to watch a lot of sports. Now those are the only two sports I watch. And in those sports, you have weight cutting. Now, I know what people are going to say. You need weight cutting because you need to know what two people are going to fight at to make it fair. Well, hey, if they're both fighting at 155 pounds, like the championship fight is going to be at in the UFC this weekend or tonight, they need to know that it's going to be a fair fight because both guys weighed in at the same weight. At this case, it's 155 pounds. But here's why I think it's stupid, is because you have two guys who are only going to be at 155 pounds for about 2 hours. They're going to, or no, for maybe 12 hours, all right? Let's just say around that area. They're going to lose as much weight as they can in a short period of time, and then they're going to gain back all the weight that they cut during this week, all right? Because that's what they were doing this week. They were cutting weight. They call it the fight before the fight, which is, again, another stupid thing. You're going to fight, instead of fighting your opponent, you're fighting the scale just to make the weight. But they're going to lose the weight and they're going to gain it all back. So two guys that are going to probably both weigh in on the night of the fight, somewhere between 170 and 180 pounds, are competing at the weight class of 155 pounds. Now, what I say is they all know what their walking around weight is or what their training weight is. Everybody talks about it. These guys all train at gyms with other people and they spar with other people in preparation for the camp or in preparation for the fight. And they all have a certain weight. They all know what weight that they like to be at when they go in the cage and actually fight on the championship night or on the event night. So if you know you're going to fight at 175 or somewhere between 170 and 180, why are we taking an elite athlete, this is their biggest event, their championship fight, and making them fight before the fight, deplete themselves, dehydrate themselves down to the point where they're skin and bones for, like I said, for 6 hours, and then they're going to rehydrate, and then for the next 24 hours, 36 hours, they rehydrate, refuel, and get back to it. To me, it's like, okay, you got the Super Bowl. Instead of the athletes focusing on game planning, focusing on sleep, focusing on, figuring out their opponents, they're going to be losing weight, dieting, dehydrating themselves by not drinking water for the week of, and we're expecting them to, on one day, weigh in on Saturday, and then gain back that weight for Sunday, and have this great performance. We expect athletes, especially professional athletes, to give us a show, to have a great sporting event. But then we're depleting them to the point of where they're not even drinking water right before they have this athletic endeavor, which you need hydration. And of course, they're going to rehydrate, but when they both are going to be around the same weight walking into the cage, why are you taking two guys who are going to weigh 170, dropping them down to 155, and then both walking back in at 170? Now you're going to say, well, some guys aren't going to fight at that weight. Some guys are able to gain more weight back. Well, why doesn't the guy who's fighting at 180 pounds fight someone that's fighting at 180 pounds on the night of the fight? You could solve that problem by having a scale in the back as they call their name. Hey, this is going to be this fighter from this country. They walk out, but they have to get on the scale before. Oh, you'd say, oh, well, the event might not go through. I can solve that for you. If the person doesn't weigh in on the weight that they know that they're going to weigh or that they signed the contract on, let's just say it's 180 pounds, they pay a fine. They have to pay like a percentage of what they would have made in their purse because they screwed up the event. And then when they rebook the fight, because they're going to rebook the fight, that person then owes part of their purse to the other person that made weight, let's just say. But the thing is that wouldn't happen because the guys, I know that you're saying that they want to get an advantage. Get rid of the advantage. Have everybody weigh in before. And the reason why I know that they could do this is because this is what they used to do. They talk to UFC fighters or MMA fighters back in the day. They would show up to a fight. They would weigh in on a scale and they'd say, you're at 170 pounds. That guy, not even at 170. That guy's at 180. You're the two closest weights you guys are going to fight. And they fought. They didn't oh my God, the guy's 10 pounds heavier than me, and they get all upset. Now, of course, you're saying, well, this isn't for millions of dollars. There's not a lot on the stake. It's not endorsements. There's not all this other things going on. You could get hurt as well. Well, you're in a sport where you beat the shit out of each other, number one. So you're going to get hurt. But number two, if you agree on it, if you sign a contract that says, hey, we just have to be under 180 pounds before we walk in the ring, you're going to get better athletes. You're going to get better hydration. You're going to have less of these brain, the stuff that ends up happening, the CTE, because your brain is going to be more hydrated. It's going to be able to take a shot better. You're going to have better performance overall. I just don't see what the point is when you know that both of these guys are going to cut around the same amount of weight and then rehydrate back to that same amount of weight. And let's just say someone is genetically gifted that they can rehydrate better, or they can do, then they're going to fight in a different weight class. And you're saying, well, then they can't make all these weight classes. Well, look, even if you're saying to me, well, then now this other person is going to have an advantage because they're going to be a heavier weight and compared to this one. Let's just say you sign a contract and you're at 175 and this other person's at 180. Well, that's what the fight's going to happen like anyways, because the person rehydrated. So whether you sign the contract and instead of depleting yourself and going back to that normal weight, or you do that, either way, if the guy can rehydrate better and is at 180 pounds, you're going to be 5 pound deficit at your 175. If you sign the contract and you're at 175 and you're at your best, and he's at 180 and he's at his best, you're still going to have a 5 pound. Now, if you're somewhere in between the weight classes, let's just say, where you're a 160 pounder and you can't fight at 155 and you can't fight at 170, tough shit. Or maybe they'd make more weight classes. But back in the day, there were no weight classes. Back in the day, you fought people with 15-pound advantages. You hear these stories from these guys all the time. So I don't get it. If we're talking about being a professional sport and competing at the highest level, to me, it doesn't make any sense, okay? So especially when everybody knows that they're going to compete at a certain weight when they walk in the cage or walk in the ring. I just don't understand it. And I see the side of it where it's like you need to have an agreement and everybody has the same amount of weight. But you could do that knowing, and you could do that leading up to the fight. Like there's so many ways of people saying that you're going to cheat the system. No, you're just not. It's just going to be what people weigh, And so I just don't see why you couldn't fix that by having a scale in the back right before they walk out. And again, making these penalties really high. If you're someone who's making $20,000 on a fight and the fine is $20,000, you're not going to not be at the weight that you want to be at. Okay, you're not going to sign a contract for something that you're not going to be able to be at that weight on fight week. Okay, these things going in. They all know this stuff. They've been fighting at the same weight class, let's just say 155, for so long. They know the process. They have all these nutritionists, but they're just cutting the weight, dehydrating them, and rehydrating it back. And we're going to be at the same exact spot. So I don't get it. I don't know why it's still around. I don't know why you couldn't get rid of that by just having that scale and having the agreement and having again, some people are going to be tweeners where they're not going to be in the exact weight class and they're not going to fight at exactly a weight. You're going to have a disadvantage. Like I said, you're going to have that disadvantage whether you have the weight cut or not, whether you have it or not. So why don't you be at your best physically, just like every other sport that doesn't do this? Every other sport, you compete at your hydrated best with the best sleep. They talk about it. They don't get sleep. It's a terrible experience for them. They're mentally challenged from it. There's tons of health consequences. Don't get me started on that, right? The main event this weekend, tonight, the fight. The guy pulled out of the fight. Now, he supposedly had a back injury, but a lot of times these people can't even make the fight because the weight cut's so bad, especially with the women, okay? Because sometimes during their parts of their menstrual cycle, their weight, is harder for them to take off. So they're holding on to more water. It's more difficult for them and they end up with problems. What are we doing this for? Just so that we can say that both guys are at 155? If people agree that the belt is at a certain weight and everyone's fighting underneath that weight, we're all good. So I don't get it. I think one championship did hydration tests. Still, guys were rehydrating and they had better genetics at showing those tests, and they're going to game that system. Just put a scale in the back before they walk out, and the contract has very strict penalties because they need the show to go on. Have backup fighters ready so that if someone pulls out, they have everything ready. The UFC could do this. I know you're talking about the smaller shows. They wouldn't be able to do this. People are just watching people beat the shit out of each other. We don't have very high standards as it is for these things. I can get at the very, very top level for the fights that cost millions of dollars and the venues and the ticket sales and all those types of things. That's why you just make the stakes higher and you tell these guys, if you don't, you're out. And I think that you would have people falling in line because you'd see them as the weeks go. You'd see them as you go. Hey, this guy's on weight. He's just this because we know he's on weight because that's what he fights at. That's what he trains at. That's what it's like. It's not like these guys are dieting down just for the fight. They're getting themselves in peak physical shape and they know what weight that's going to be. So I don't get it. I don't understand it. I think if you're going to call yourself a professional sport, don't get me started on the rules of MMA. I can make another video on that. They need to change that as well if they want to make it a professional sport and get it involved. It's the only sport I watch. It's technically professional, but it's got a lot of work to do if you really want to break into that next sphere. And I got all the right ideas, don't I? Well, anyways, about weight cutting, I just think that it's dumb. And that's all I got for today. Bye.